Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Political Fixer Live. I'm Shauna Presley Vircher, and boy, do we have a lot to cover this evening. I'm so glad that you're here on this lovely Tuesday, and this is going to be a fun episode. We have got a lot to discuss. I'm excited to see you guys and to hear your thoughts on our topic. Our theme for this evening is actually, believe it or not, a super positive one. It's about taking back our power. And we're going to highlight different stories. And while the stories themselves are going to get a little bit dark, I will tell you all of them leads to a powerful conclusion where someone stood up, raised their voices, and were making an impact. So that's the theme for tonight is stories where we are taking back our power. We're going to talk more about not only what has happened, but other opportunities for other people to step in, including yourselves. And you could be anyone with any level of experience, and you can do something to make a difference right now on issues that seem really large with an administration that likes to tell us that they have every power. We're finding out not so fast, my friend. All right, we are going to talk so much with each other. If you are new to Political Fixer Live, first of all, welcome to the Political Fixer family. Here's how it works. We take 3 different topics, some of them the top stories covered in the week, and some of them stories that we think honestly should have gotten a bit more coverage. And then I give you some information. What's my take on it? What are we finding? What's the truth? And what is a myth or complete propaganda? And then we throw it to you guys, the audience members, you guys, the Political Fixer family, you guys, some of whom have more expertise by far than I do. And we say, what are our thoughts? What's our game plan? And we have that family discussion until we feel like we understand it better. And in some cases, we have an action plan. And then, of course, my favorite part of the show is when I get to hear from all of you, what you're working on, what you're interested in, and what's going on in your communities. What are different events that you want to share? What are different protests that might be happening, or different events or organizations that you think we should join or be involved in? So, really excited to dive in tonight. Let's go through what our 3 topics are for tonight. Okay, I got to tell you, I'm really excited for our top segment. We are going to cover the top story of the evening, but in a little bit of a different twist. We're going to talk about all of the drama. ABC has always been known for its dramatic soap operas, and this week one played out in real life. What actually happened? What do we know from behind the scenes? And this, I'm excited to say, if any of you are familiar with Political Fixer Live, you know I love a good story. Well, we have a great one that sets up the stage for what happened with Jimmy Kimmel and what we can all do moving in the future. What's happening? Is the fight over? Spoiler alert, it's not, but we won one round. All right, so that's our top story we're going to do at the end of the show. Our other stories, all right, 47, not doing so well, not looking so well, not having a really great run of things. For all of the saber rattling, we're going to do a quick rundown of a few things that are going very wrong in this man's life that impact all of us. But there is one in particular that is looming, and it has to do with something that is happening tonight that we might find out some information live on this show. So we're going to tell you what is happening, why is he really so upset right now, and what we can all watch for that might be earth shattering, that might happen during this hour. But first, the rapture didn't happen. However, there are hundreds of people, if not thousands, that are disappearing. We're going to turn this into a pretty somber moment. This is not a positive story, but again, our theme for tonight is power. We are going to talk about taking the power back. So we are going to go a little bit dark, but there is a powerful positive conclusion. And good evening to, before we get started, I got to say hi to all of our Political Fixer regulars. I see Kelly is on tonight. I see that we've got Herb V67. We've got Marlene ML. I see so many fun Political Fixer family and friends on tonight. We have Sarah, of course, running the show as usual, our producer with the most here. And then, of course, we have Jay Robot making sure that everyone plays nicely with each other children, who's also going to be helping out. And we appreciate for sure. All of the different gifts and likes. The Political Fixer family is doing a lot of work around here, not just for this show, but to try to make a difference in this election cycle. And we definitely appreciate it when you show us positivity and love. So thank you. So to dive in, getting us started with already 3,000 likes, let's dive into our top of the hour story. So there's been a lot of coverage, jokes, some of it serious, some people genuinely expecting the rapture to happen and thinking that they are going to be disappeared. And I am someone that grew up in a very conservative, very religious household. I am familiar with the rapture story and its iterations over the last several years, as well as how people can be used and manipulated with this concept. Now, setting that aside for a second, while people were making TikToks and memes and all kinds of fun was being had at these people's expense, then something real was happening where hundreds of people actually were being disappeared. But instead of being taken to heaven, they have been captured and taken in their family's place as well, in their own version of hell on earth. I don't want to lose sight of this immigration story because there are more twists and turns, and it's a very important one. Let me tell you what is happening now with the story of immigrants and ICE and why I'm dedicating some time to it during this program. All right. We have been talking about the detention facility in what they call Alligator Alcatraz, this thrown together facility in the Everglades of Florida, intentionally designed to be intimidating, cruel, and violate as many human rights as they can get away with. There's been a number of organizations and groups and protesters who have stepped up and done what they could to stop things. Recently, organizations like the ACLU believed that they had won a collective victory, but not because of the human rights abuses, because they had teamed up with other environmental organizations that found that their throwing together of this new torture detention camp violated the environmental laws and the development protections in particularly in that part of the state in the Everglades, which, believe it or not, protecting the environment used to be a bipartisan position even in Florida. Not so today. Okay, moving on. So we thought there was a victory. We were seeing buses and buses and buses of people being reported as being transferred out of the so-called Alligator Alcatraz, and we're like, yay, we did it, we won. Okay, well, this is when it gets dicey. So apparently those environmental protections that they won the case about are federal. But 47's not so good at paying his bills, and apparently his administration is not either. They had never actually paid the state of Florida for their torture camp. So technically, they argued, it's not federal yet, it's the state of Florida's problem. So now you have the state saying, we can keep it open. And the federal court saying, we're not sure, we're just going to put a hold on everything. So could they operate? Could they not? It was a gray area. And while all of this was going back and forth, something awful was happening. People were being transported and lost in the system entirely. The Miami Herald reported recently, I want to give credit to these journalists. The Miami Herald is just doing an amazing job covering this story. If you have the ability to subscribe to any local publications, this is one I would highly recommend to stay in. They do report on national stories as well. So this particular piece was by Ben Wielder and Shirsho Dasgupta. This was on September 16th, so it was just last week, and it's just now getting more coverage that hundreds of Alligator Alcatraz detainees completely have fallen off the grid. There's around 800 humans that are nowhere in the database anywhere. And here's what's happening. When you look at the ICE database, which is federal, then it says, oh, sorry, we don't have it anymore. You can call the office, but this is a state facility. And would anyone like to guess what happens when you call the state people? Oh, that's not our problem. That's an immigration problem. That's federal. Now, attorneys can't find them. Their families can't find them. No one knows where these people have been taken. And this would be troubling in and of itself. But we know there were other problems already happening prior to these disappearances. So if you're just joining us, we're talking about Alligator Alcatraz and how over 800 detainees have just disappeared. No one can find them. Now, on top of that, before this all happened, before all of the chaos, then there were already problems. There was a guy His name is Alex Solomiani. He is an immigration attorney who says that one of his clients is a 53-year-old man from Guatemala. He has been in the United States for nearly 25 years. He was stopped by Highway Patrol. There is no evidence of any criminal record with this guy. He's a house painter. He's married. He has children, and he was supposed to show up for his immigration hearing. And it was at that point where his attorney showed up and the client did not. No one notified his attorney that he had been taken. They could not find him because, whoops, even though he was here and scheduled and doing his hearings and all of these things, they accidentally deported him back to Guatemala. There are thousands of reports of people that are in ICE custody, including pregnant women who have been abused and some of whom are now missing. We have also a guy named Michael Borrego Fernandez. He's 35 years old. He's Cuban. And he says that he was moved from one facility to another. And then they said, no, it's fine. He's going to be here in this facility in California. No, he's in Florida. His family could not find him. And, his mother, his wife, he's got a 3-year-old daughter, his attorney, they're all trying to find him. And they said, oh, just call the California facility. He's been moved now. No, he needed an emergency surgery. That's how they got ICE to finally tell them, sorry, we accidentally deported him to Mexico. He's Cuban, but they took him to Mexico. Marlene is adding more context to this story. We're seeing detainees being loaded onto planes that can open mid-flight. Transponders are being turned off. Marlene, such a good point. We are seeing flights that allegedly contain immigrants that have been captured, and they start to fly, and then they turn off the tracking information. So we don't know where they're taking these human beings. Kathy McGrath Walcott is saying it all lands on 47. He is responsible for all of this. I agree with half of what you're saying, Kathy. I do think he is ultimately responsible, but I think there is literally blood on so many hands. And I hope that ultimately we find anyone having to do with any of this and that they are held accountable in an actual court of law, not a kangaroo court. Square Foot Gardening for You brings up a good point. I wonder what they're doing with these people's personal effects. I would guess stealing them. Based on what we know about law enforcement and property seizures and going through those little slowdown towns. And again, I'm from the South. I'm going to guess they're keeping it, that they're just jacking this people's stuff, right? Midlife Cringe says all of the enablers are guilty too. So, all right, very serious things happening here. I'm not done with the dark, but I promise you again, our theme for tonight is seizing our power. We are going to go back up in just a moment, but let me go ahead and show just how serious this is. These are the people that are missing, but there are 2 senators in Georgia who I happen to adore, Senators Ossoff and Warnock, who have made it their personal missions to elevate this issue. In particular, they would like some answers on more than a dozen people that they know of who have died in ICE custody. What is happening with them? They are demanding answers. Now, these are not exclusive to the Florida situation. They know for a fact that some of them have died in immigration detention centers in Georgia, as well as across the country. And, I like this statement that Senator Ossoff says. He says, whatever our views on border enforcement, immigration policy, I think the overwhelming majority of the American people does not want detainees abused while they're in U.S. custody. I mean, he's just calling out how outrageous this is in a very civil way, much calmer than I think that I would be able to do that. And they are launching a Senate investigation into what's happening with these deaths. They cannot get answers on either the deaths or the alleged abuse. As just a quick number, they have on record that at one point, the Department of Homeland Security only had 46,000 beds across the entire nation. And yet they had on record over 50,000 people that they were acknowledging they had detained. So clear abuses that are not even close to being hidden well. And now they're scaling up with the new budget that they've received. So right now, they're trying to make sure that they are getting some accountability. Now, these are senators. They're using their power to both amplify the issue and go on media interviews, and they're also using their power to try to launch investigations and get answers into an organization that supposedly they're supposed to have some oversight on it. All of that is well and good, but what can the rest of us do who are not senators? Well, the governor of California and their legislature showed us one path forward. Um, on September 21st, just a couple of days ago, officially, Governor Newsom signed into law a ban in California that will go into effect on January 1st that says that immigration agents or those acting on their behalf can no longer wear masks and hide their identities. This is a huge step forward. Now, you might be asking yourself, okay, they're still disappearing people. What does the mask have to do with anything? Because the methods matter. If they are taking people without due process, I read a story this week about one gentleman who ICE knocked on his door and they wanted him to come outside. He didn't want to be captured. And so he said, I have my papers. Can I give them to you through my door? And they responded by taking his 5-year-old daughter and holding her hostage and saying, no, you cannot. If you want your daughter, you have to come out. Okay, that would be a crime. That's known as kidnapping, literally. And so if they were not masked, then they could be personally prosecuted for crimes as agents they commit. Having the authority to execute unlawful orders does not make them legal. I'll say it a different way. You break the law in a state, you can still go to jail, even if 47's like, good boy for breaking that law, right? Midlife Cringe is talking about how so many people are looking for their family members. Um, you know, there's more of you sharing so many other stories of people disappearing. Kathy saying, Kathy McGrath saying, I think it's an amazing bill from Newsom in California. Sarah pointing out how great Ossoff is, and you guys having a discussion about what a gem he is. He's also up for reelection, people. So we're going to be working hard on that one. So what can you do? First of all, continue talking about these stories. I know it's exhausting. I know it's gut wrenching. I didn't wake up today and necessarily want to start our time together with, hey, let's talk about missing humans, but it's our obligation. It's our responsibility for so many reasons to continue to elevate this story. If you're a content creator, then you can actually create content, share content on your pages, your TikToks, what have you, about what's going on and educate people, because so many people are misinformed, thinking that either these things aren't real that are happening or they're happening to dangerous criminals. Again, not that I think that should make a difference, but we can clarify some of that misinformation. That's one thing that you can do, is create content. You can share content like that Miami Herald piece if you find it valuable. That's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is call your local newspapers and television stations and other news broadcasters, or maybe reach out online to different bloggers and posters that you like and ask them to do more coverage of this story and keep going. The especially corporate media responds to public pressure. We're going to be talking about that more later in the show. So that's another thing you can do to keep the story going. But there's a very specific homework objective that I'm going to give you here as we wrap up our top story of the hour, which is the disappearance of these individuals. This doesn't have to be the unmasking law, doesn't have to be a California specific thing. We can get that bill passed in other states. So if you're in a state that is not California, you can start calling your state legislators. Most of you have state reps and state senators. You also have a governor. Whether or not they will listen, who can say? But a lot of them are up for reelection soon, and getting them on the record saying that they believe that these people should be able to terrorize their citizens while remaining anonymous, that's a pretty hard line position. And so it is very likely that we could create political pressure in other states to pass a mask ban similar to what they did in California. So there's a specific thing. A lot of times we're told, call our congressperson. And sometimes it feels like they don't hear us, especially when they're getting a bazillion calls. But calling a state representative, for many people, that is still highly effective. So, again, I'm going to give you the list of people that I think would be effective at calling. And some of them may be Republicans, but they might not be hardliners that think that I should have a right to terrorize everyone. That's a pretty harsh position to take. So, you've got usually most of the time you have state representatives. Some of you have assembly people or something similar. You usually have state senators on top of that, different than the US senators. You can call your state attorneys and you can also call the governor's office. But general rule of thumb, the lower down you go on the org chart, the more likely that phone call is going to have an impact. So that's your homework for this assignment here, trying to do our part to help these families who have just got to feel so scared and so helpless. Let's try to raise our voices for them in the immigrant community. And remember, if it can happen to them, it can happen to any of us. Square Foot Gardening saying that her congressperson is Andy Harris, who heads the Freedom Caucus. So yeah, okay, that's probably a wasted nickel there. um, so WTF is JoJo says we need the numbers and energy just displayed by white folks for Kimmel. Yet there's a lot to this Kimmel story. We're going to be covering that next after this next story. So definitely stay tuned for that. But you're right, there was a lot of energy there and a lot of conversation to be had. If you're in a state that allows you to write a bill, Guava Girl is saying you can use California as an example bill. That is so true. It's always good to cheat off of someone else's homework when it comes to political bill writing when it's effective. So, yeah, definitely love that. So, there's so much that we can do to try to reach out and amplify this issue. Let's go ahead and move on to our next topic, but definitely keep the conversation going as much as you guys want to. But I want to leave enough time at the top of the hour, at the end of the hour, for our really, I'm excited about the story and the rabbit hole that we went down with our top story of the week. And what WTF at Jojo says, look what was accomplished in just 72 hours. You're this perfect segue, Jojo, perfect segue. Before I keep going into the next story, again, thank you to all of you just joining us. You're on Political Fixer Live. We're covering the top headlines of the week. Some of them are the more popular things that you all were already talking and posting about. But in the case of the story that we just covered, sometimes we talk about things that candidly we feel like should be getting more press coverage. And we try to do it from a position of positivity and action. We try to think as much as we can about what actions we can take. We are not helpless passengers here. So the theme for tonight in particular is exercising our power and the successful flex of power, which we've had a pretty good week. It may not have felt like it, but we've had a pretty good week, and we're going to talk about some of the other stuff happening with that. We're already at over 21,000 likes. That's amazing. I want to thank our gifters, including Herb V67 and Marlene ML, Dana, Guava Girl 808, and Warren. And I also want to thank those of you that are sharing the live with others. We really appreciate you, including Kathy McGrath, Carrie, and Lee. Thank you so much. Or Leah, forgive me. I think that was Leah based on the spelling. Okay. Next story you guys are going to enjoy, I think. There is a ticking time bomb that not enough people are talking about, and we could see it hit the little zero tonight. We're going to be keeping an eye on the clock. Let me tell you what's going on and the real reason that 47 is losing it. I had to use so much discipline, you guys, when trying to decide what we were going to cover tonight. We're not going to talk about every disaster that 47 has had lately, including the humiliating speech that he made on the floor of the United Nations today. I wish that I could just, go on a riff and mock this dude, but we have important issues to discuss. Let's do a rundown, though, of how 47 is just not doing well. And I want to do this for a reason, not just because I enjoy really sticking it to this guy. I think he is pure evil. I am not a fan of bullying, except except when someone is really hurting other people. And then I feel like, you know what, we gotta go after this guy. All right, so polls. Let's start with polls. different ways that 47 is not doing well. The reason that I'm talking about all of this stuff is because he wants us to think that it's hopeless. That's how they win. Don't bother fighting. Don't bother speaking up. We control everything. There's nothing that can be done. We won. You lost. Shut up. That's basically what they want to see happen. But that's actually not what's happening. In fact, he's losing a lot right now. Polling. The recent Gallup poll finds that 47, with the direction of the country and the approval rating since he took office, only 29% of the country, and this includes Democrats, independents, and Republicans, only 29% of the country are satisfied with the direction. He has a current approximate approval rating of 29% when it comes to the direction of the country. Now, we always say numbers need context. A lot of times it's hard to think about, okay, well, is that good? Is that bad? Let me give you some context on that number, 29%. Even at the height of inflation during President Biden's terms, he never hit below a 36% approval rating. However, we're at a 29 already, just what, 8, 9 months in with 47. During the George W. Bush financial crisis, his numbers in the mid 20s. Jimmy Carter during the energy crisis, mid to high 20s. Richard Nixon during Watergate, right before he resigned, he was at 24%. 47's already down to 29%. These are disastrous, historically bad, that he's going to be listed as one of the worst presidents of all time if we still have history books, person. Okay. So that's hurting his ego because he knows that these numbers are going down. His approval rating, particularly among Latino voters, can't imagine why. Could have nothing to do with the story we already covered. It has crashed. His approval rating with Latino voters has cratered since he took office. It has dropped 12 points. That is massive by political context numbers. He's also losing in court. He's lost in court with the Fed governor, Lisa Cook. He tried to remove her, and a federal judge says, nope, can't do it. He tried to freeze the funding of Harvard, and a federal judge in Massachusetts said, just about a week and a half ago that no, that violates free speech. You can't take their money. So he lost versus Harvard. He had already taken money essentially from UCLA, and another court said you have to give it back. It's $500 million worth of research funding that they took, and they said that it violated administrative procedures and they took it illegally. So he had to give that back. That is just to name a few of the court cases that he says all this stuff. We hear the bad stuff like, oh, he's going after this, he's going after that. But look what happens when these organizations fight him. When they stand up and they speak out, they are winning by and large. In the economy, we have inflation increasing. We have job growth the slowest that it's been since the height of the pandemic. And on top of that, his band of losers keeps on losing. It's not just 47 that's looking bad. You have Kash Patel, who looked like an absolute moron during the Charlie Kirk investigation. That guy did not look like he knew what he was doing. And if it wasn't for the father turning him in, it looked like these people would never find the person who killed Kirk. And even conservatives right now are calling for Pam Bondi to step down, not just because she's crooked as sin, but also because of her bungling of the Epstein case. But this week, one of his favorite children disappointed him when it wasn't his actions, it was the fact that the actions got out. He's been embarrassed by none other than the border czar, Tom Homan. And I mean, what's not to love about this guy, right? This guy who just wants to beat up on immigrants for a living and remove all of our constitutional due process rights. What's not to love about this guy? Well, apparently he's also guilty, allegedly, of fraud. In case you missed this story earlier in the week, NBC, I think, broke the story that it turns out that Tom Homan, the current border czar, was offered a $50,000 cash bribe, saying to people, again, allegedly, we haven't seen the reports yet, that this was back in September of 2024, that if 47 got elected again, he could help people get government contracts. He just needed a cash payoff. Oh, and the Department of Justice, notably their counterintelligence division, they caught him doing this on camera. All right. Let's talk about this just briefly. This isn't the height of the story. This isn't the gotcha. This is just one of the speed bumps that happened to 47. We're going to go on to the big one in just a second, but I think it's really important to spend a moment on this Homan story. Let's just go down my top 3 things I would like to point out in this story. Number 1, let's talk about media strategy. How did the administration handle this story coming out in public view? All right, well, they lied about it. That's their go-to playbook. Okay, so there was a Department of Justice investigation. Apparently, it was an operation that they were filming, and they got not only photos, but videos of this guy accepting cash in a bag of food. By the way, what is with these crooked guys literally handing people cash in bags of food? That's so weird. Okay, so he hands him this bag of food. This guy allegedly accepts it. And then once 47 takes office, that investigation completely disappears. So the first question that is, how did they handle the news breaking? They lied. They said, "Oh no, we're familiar with the investigation that you're talking about, but he never broke the law. In fact, if you were to watch the tapes, you would see that he refused the bribe." Ooh, okay, so now we have to ask for the release of more government tapes. We now need to ask for the release of the Epstein tapes and files, and we now need to ask also for the Homan tapes and files. Awesome. Show us. I'm sure they'll be getting to that any moment. So that story is going to continue to grow. You're going to see more congressional members asking for things. We should keep up the pressure in the media. It's a fairly new story. And that brings me to point 2. Why should we care? I mean, with all of the scheme of all of the crazy and all of the awful, why should we care about a guy allegedly accepting a bribe from several months ago? Because of 2 reasons. Number 1, this guy is purporting to lock up people who look like they might be immigrants to protect us from crime while he is committing crime. Should it be more shocking that it is? Absolutely. But if we stop and think about the weight of it for just a second, we cannot afford to cede this ground. We cannot afford to just accept the idea that we're officially a nation of 2 scales of justice officially. Now, we all know the justice system has been flawed since the beginning of this nation's founding, that immigrants are not the only marginalized group that receive the short end of the stick when it comes to the criminal justice system, on and on and on. But to accept it, to make it part of the official playbook, takes us another step past a point of no return. And if we have any chance of restoring this democracy to a higher standard at any point, then we have to make hay of this. We have to say that, listen, this is wrong and we can't just cede this ground. But here's another reason, and this is the third point I want to point out about this story. This is yet another person who was caught committing a crime that 47 and his cronies said, "Don't worry, dude, we got you." That's no longer a person that works for this administration. That's now a person who is owned by this administration. Because at any point, this person knows, Homan and Eric Adams and so many others, they know at any moment they could be taken in and subjected to the same type of treatment that they are subjecting people to. They could be arrested. They could lose their livelihoods or worse, right? So when you own someone, there's no gray area as to what they will and will not do. When they are ordered to perform an act for you, it doesn't matter how heinous it is, how unethical it is, how illegal it is. They own you. And your thought goes to yourself, maybe your family members, how you're going to be impacted. This is a huge issue. We now know that one of the highest ranking members of our State Department, the border czar, is compromised and owned. And that is a huge problem for all of us. How many others? How many others are owned? How many others do they have dirt on? Do they have charges on? Do they have blackmail or compromise on? Again, I like to remind everyone both servers were hacked, not just the DNC, but the RNC, and yet only the DNC was released by Russia. We don't know who has what. How many of these people are owned? That impacts all of us. All right. I'm going to tell you the other shoe of this story. all of that stuff that I just listed, the polling, the court case losses, the economy, how foolish 47 looks right now, and even his band of goons disappointing him. All of that really bad, but that's not what's keeping him up at night. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But WTF as JoJo says exactly how Homan commanded loyalty, but he used fear of death. Yes. User 9654, good to see you again, user. I think they have blackmail on many senators. Or you say all the senators. I don't think all of them, but I do think many of them. I think we're overestimating or underestimating just cowardice as a factor here. I actually don't think we unfortunately need blackmail on all of them. I think they've got blackmail on a few, and then the rest of them are just weak. Um, I want to, as we keep going, I want to thank all the new fan club members. Welcome to Political Fixer Live. Herb V67, you're crushing it tonight. Thank you so much. Warren and Danny, so great to have all of you. And welcome to all of you on Political Fixer Live. If you're just joining us, we're in our second story. We are talking about 47 really not doing great. And we're going to talk about the thing he's scared of most in just a second and how we might get an answer to it this week. In fact, tonight we might have something. We're going to see. I'm going to fill you all in on that. But in the meantime, learning that one of his high-ranking officials has been compromised in the fact that he was allegedly caught doing a little bit of fraud, as one does, accepting some cash in a bag. It happens to the best of us. And then voila, charges are disappeared, and he's suddenly the go-to guy to carry out any of the awful marching orders against other people, right? Okay. Let's keep going while you guys continue this conversation. Wow, we're already at 45,000 likes. I'm so excited to get you guys to the next story. You have no idea, but this is important. All right, so we're talking about how 47 is not doing well. And for any of you that have been following either today's UN speech, his recent appearances in different places, his unhinged rants, even for him, and the "you better prosecute my enemies right now," again, impeachable offense, but whatever, we're just going to roll right past it. All of this stuff, even for him, it's like he went from like a 9 to a 10 lately. There is a reason, and I'm going to tell you what it is. We had talked about on this show that one of our organizations that we founded for activism, Equal Rights Now, which you can visit at equalrightsnow.us. This is an organization specifically dedicated to one top mission: achieving equal rights for women via the US Constitution. We do not have them, but also highlighting and amplifying the consequences of not being equal citizens. And one of them is that certain crimes that disproportionately impact women are completely ignored or worse. And for that reason, we talked about working on a project to sue the Department of Justice on behalf of women in particular, those who, any women in any consequential position at all, raising children in the job, want to exist in a safe space. Like, really, any women and women's allies as well are welcome to join the class action should it be filed. And specifically, there is a different class of filing for women who are survivors of abuse. And the thinking is that we have a right to know who's on that Epstein list, because these could be people right next to us. They could be in boardrooms. They could be controlling companies with products that we are funding them, perpetrating this abuse. They could be making laws that govern us, our daughters, and so on. So if you go to equalrightsnow.us, you can see more about that. Let me give you a quick update on that, because again, there's some new developments today that we want to cover. So in that, so many of you came forward and so many of you shared just gut-wrenching but powerful stories with us about why this matters to you. And as a result of that, we were able to speak to some of the largest social justice legal organizations in the country, and they have agreed to stand by our side as we move this forward. And as we were preparing this class action, and as we were looking at the best way to approach this, do we get more people first and go to the media first? Do we file something first and then go get people? We were in the middle of this conversation and something happened. Representative Massey, Thomas Massey, who is a Republican, and Representative Ro Khanna, a Democrat from California, came together and filed something known as a discharge petition. Let me tell you a little bit about what this is. A discharge petition is when instead of just saying, I want to file something and having it go through the different committees and things like that, it's essentially like a letter that the different members of Congress have the option to sign that says, hey, we would like this to officially be a vote on whether or not this thing should happen. And this particular discharge position is known as the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And the way that it works is this: a majority of representatives in Congress have to sign it, and then it's successful. Now there's 435 spots in Congress, and so we need 218 signatures in order for things to move forward. 218. I want you to remember that number, 218. We're going to come back to it in just a second. Now, if this gets signed, it essentially forces a vote that reinforces that letter, that discharge position that says they want full public release of the files within 30 days. Now, there's a couple of things. Number one, they would do minimal redactions to protect the safety and security of the victims, so no worries there. But also, it would then have to go to the Senate. Now, you might be asking yourself a few things. Number one, there's not 218 Democrats. Are they going to get enough signatures? We're going to cover that one in just a second. The second question is, why would the Senate say yes to this? Because a discharge petition like this has a lot of weight to it. It would show a bipartisan effort, but also there are a number of people behind the scenes that said, listen, personally, we think the Epstein files should be released. We just don't want to be the one that puts it over the edge because he'll target us personally. So a lot of people believe that this discharge petition could outweigh anything: a lawsuit, people being upset, privacy concerns, federal courts keeping things under lock and key. Like, all these things could be outweighed by this discharge petition. Okay. So, where are we with the discharge petition? We were stuck at around 212, which is how many Democrats were expected to sign on. But then more Republicans started to sign. And so we were stuck at 216. We needed 218. Recently, there was a special election in Virginia's 11th district, and a Democrat won that election. And one of their first acts after being sworn in after that special election, you guessed it, to sign that discharge petition. So as of this moment, we have 217 out of 218, one more, and we break this huge milestone together and we force it forward as hard as we can. So you might be asking, do we need another Republican to be the person that's going to grow a spine and cross over and do the right thing and then bear the brunt of the, whatever happens, the consequences? We don't actually. Something tonight could happen that could put this 218 over the edge. Let me tell you what it is. There is a special election happening tonight in Arizona. It is the 7th congressional district. That seat was open because Raul Grijalva passed away in March. Now, his daughter, the late congressman's daughter, Adelita, is running to fill his seat. If she wins her election tonight, Adelita has already said that, yes, she will sign the discharge petition as soon as she is sworn in. That would put us over to 218. Okay, this is really big. And this is why I believe 47's behavior has been more Cocoa Puffs than usual, because he knows he can hear it coming. And so all of this other stuff, this is what it's really about. So we are going to be following this race. If you're watching this live right now, and welcome to those of you who are watching Political Fixer Live, the polls close in Arizona at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, which is 10 p.m. Eastern, which means in about 15 minutes, we're going to start seeing poll results coming in. And I'm going to be watching for all of that with you all. And Sarah, I'm going to put you on the spot as well to help me watch for that Arizona election result. We are looking to see if Arizona's 7th district goes to Adelita Grijalva, who is running in her late father's seat as a Democrat, who has said she will happily be the final signature on that discharge petition. So this is possibly earth-shattering. We're going to continue to follow this story. And don't worry, if this, for whatever reason, stalls, we're not giving up. We will leverage our organizing power. And if you want to go ahead and sign on to the petition on Equal Rights Now, you can do that at any time. And we will protect your information. We will only publish what you give us permission to share. And so any statements you want to share will remain private if you prefer. That is equalrightsnow.us, as in us, as in United States, equalrightsnow.us. All right, seeing so many great comments here. I love Kelly's comment that I missed earlier, that Tom Homan, the Borders arc, could have starred in The Sopranos. I mean, you'd hope he'd be smarter though, right? Like, to be a good mobster, you got to be smart. And that's one of the most frustrating things about this administration, is just how we sometimes feel like we're losing to the biggest idiots on the planet, right? WTF is say, I don't usually pray, but I'm going to pray right now regarding this situation with bringing the truth to light with Epstein. I'm right there with you. Marlene ML is adding to the point that Johnson, the Speaker of the House, has already canceled the sessions on the 29th and the 30th. See, they smell it coming. They smell it coming. They know that this is big, right? So I see users saying sometimes greed is your own demise. Uncle says that, did MTG back out of signing? I haven't heard that, and Politico has a tracker and hasn't reported it, but we're going to stay on top of it and see. I had a thought, called them a box of misfit toys. I love that. Though the misfit toys were lovable, at least. Like, I mean, they at least had that, right? So we're going to stay on top of this very serious story. Our theme for tonight, if you're just joining us on Political Fixer Live, has been taking back our power, using our power for collective good and change. We have talked about standing up to some of the most scary and disgusting forces that are out there. Let's talk about something a little bit lighter, which is our top story of the night. We are at already over 60,000 likes, and I'm really, really hoping that you guys like this story as much as I loved bringing it, preparing it for the show. Before I dive in, I want to thank some more of our gifters: Marcia, Marianne, Blue Betty. Oh, Professor Liberty Esquire, it's so good to see you. I miss you. We need to do another phone sesh soon. Carrie, really love the fact that WTF It's JoJo is now part of the Political Fixer fan club, as is Marcia and Blue Betty and Carrie. And I want to thank Sarah again for tracking all of this. You guys are so fast with all of your comments, and our producer, Sarah, she's right on top of it, right? All right. Bear with me as I take you down a little bit of story time, because, oh my goodness, does it pay off. Now, this is our top story of the evening. This, believe it or not, ties to everything that has been covered with the top story of the week that so many of you have been posting about and sharing. I'm really excited to bring a little bit of context to our top story of the week. We're going to start with a guy named Julian Smith. And Julian Smith was born in 1920, and he was a Baltimore engineer. And he studied engineering at Johns Hopkins, electrical engineering to be precise. And he started tinkering with gadgets. He's a guy that liked to build different things, and he started really getting into FM radios and how they work. And then as televisions started to become more popular in households, he started investigating them and how they work and what makes them different, and just started building things like transmitters and stuff on his kitchen table. And Julian actually founded something known as the Commercial Radio Institute. And it was this idea that he was going to train the next generation of broadcasters as well as these engineers to build some of this stuff. Now, this is something that I didn't know, and I've been involved in broadcasting for a number of years. But before 1962, in those early televisions, when you start picturing those huge giant boxes that families used to have, then there were the VHF channels, the lower channels, 2 through 13. And they came on all of the television sets. So every family essentially that bought a television could access channels 2 through 13. But the other channels, the ones higher on the dial, the ones 14, the 30s, the 60s, all the way up to channel 83, those are known as the UHF channels. And they were considered second class channels because most TVs couldn't access them. And so if you were on one of those channels, they thought a lot of people wouldn't see you because families literally couldn't turn their television to your channel. Well, Julian thought, you know what, this is going to change, because he read about a little known law that passed during the Kennedy administration in 1964 that said that all televisions moving forward had to include the ability to access all of the channels. And that was known as the All Channel Receiver Act. Now, you all might be asking yourself, why is this crazy lady telling us about the All Channel Receiver Act? Bear with me for just a moment as I show you. So Julian made a bet, basically with himself. He left his original career as an electrical engineer and he said, you know what? These higher stations are going to be worth more in the future. These stations higher up on the dial because everyone's going to have them. So in 1971, the Commercial Radio Institute, known as CRI, filed for a license application and became the owners of a new UHF channel, Channel 45 in Baltimore, WBFF TV. So Julian had his very first station, and he just needed to wait for people to start getting more of those newer televisions in their homes, and then he just knew that that station would be worth more. And Julian was right. In the early 70s, it was hard going. A lot of people still didn't have those new televisions, but over time, the household started to get those new television sets and get access to those channels, and they grew in value so much that Julian started to have enough money to buy a second station and a third station. In the mid 1980s, that was a long bet payoff, but it did. He bought Channel 54, his second Baltimore station, and then he bought Channel 28 in Columbus, Ohio. And it was his first out of state venture, right? So in 1985, Julian decided that he was going to give his company CRI a stronger name. He was someone, he was building up this television, local regional company of his, and he wanted to change it to something more solid than CRI Broadcasting. Now, his name again, Julian Smith, wasn't that sexy. So Smith Broadcasting didn't exactly have that ring to it. So he decided to use his middle name. And Julian Sinclair Smith became the founder of Sinclair Broadcasting Group. A few things happened in life. This tinkerer, engineer who just wanted to learn and try to explore the growth of television, in the 1980s, in the middle of the 1980s, his health started to decline. And so he asked his sons to come together and run his new Sinclair Broadcasting Group. And the oldest son, David D. Smith, stepped in as the new leader of the company. And very quickly, things took a different direction because David D. Smith said, my father was too much of a visionary to care about profits. What I want is purely to make money. And the entire future of Sinclair Broadcasting changed for the first time. There were a couple of things standing in the way of David D. Smith's quest for money. One of them is that there was a law in place in the 1980s that said that you couldn't just gobble up small stations. In fact, there was a very specific reason that they wanted people to not have too much media control over these small stations. But during the Reagan era, the Reagan administration loosened, that's a nice way of saying eliminated, the constraints and allowed Sinclair Broadcasting, as well as other people who had been lobbying, such as Rupert Murdoch, the ability to get these other stations pretty much without limitation. So that little obstacle was out of his way. But there was another thing that would happen that would later on change the course of not just Sinclair Broadcasting's history, but all of our history. And that is known as the Fairness Doctrine. Now, in the 1980s, up until the 1980s, there was a fairness doctrine since 1949 that said that if you're going to broadcast information about a story, that coverage needs to be fair and it needs to be balanced. And people, including Rupert Murdoch, lobbied the Reagan administration. And the FCC chair said, I don't see what the big deal is. A TV is just a toaster with pictures. There's no moral or ethical obligation here. Sure, let's get rid of the Fairness Doctrine. So in 1987, the Fairness Doctrine was eliminated. And just a small aside, just the absolute gall for Fox News to then take the name and slogan fair and balanced. Good Lord, they literally worked to eliminate the fair and balanced, but I'm losing my plot point here. Okay. Equal Time Act, absolutely. All right. So what does this have to do? Why are we talking about Sinclair? Why are we talking about Julian and David Smith? Well, why was it such an impediment that David Smith had this fairness doctrine, he wouldn't come to realize the benefits of not having to be fair right away. At first, he was just focused on greed and capitalism. During the 80s and the early 90s, they once they got that rule of they can't buy more stations just shoved out of the way during the Reagan era, they bought up as much as they possibly could. And right now, Sinclair Broadcasting is one of the largest media companies in the entire country. They own or control nearly 200 stations, and it's estimated that their content reaches 40% of households across America. That type of control is dangerous under the best of circumstances, but something else happened in 1996. Now, I want you to picture this. It is the mid 90s. This guy, David D. Smith, is 46 years old. He became the CEO of Sinclair Broadcasting Group because of his father's aging health. His father passes away in 1993, and Guy was barely buried when they made the company public in 1995. But with a catch. It's public-ish. Yes, Sinclair Broadcasting Group is traded publicly on the stock market, but they have a special type of stock, which says that pretty much only the family gets any real control or say on how anything goes. We'll come to that in a second. But in 1996, David D. Smith is this powerful CEO with a publicly traded company. He's 46 years old. He's got the world at his feet. He's no longer the tinkering engineer's son. He is a media mogul. And here's how people described David Smith at the time. He was known as ambitious, profit driven, and aggressive. He always contrasted with himself and talked poorly about his father, saying he was too focused on vision and not enough on money. He was a fixture in Baltimore nightlife. He was often found in different less than reputable nightclubs, private lounges, champagne rooms. And this wealthy guy was zipping about Baltimore in the company owned Mercedes when he then may have been caught up and completely arrested for being in that company car and um, having an evening with a prostitute, shall we say. We're just going to leave it at that and keep it PG. So in 1996, this very wealthy, very powerful man of Sinclair Broadcasting, David Smith, was arrested, but he did no jail time. This was very unusual at the time. The judge didn't order community service. He didn't say, if I ever catch you with a second prostitute, that's it for you. He ordered him to do a non traditional community service. He ordered the Baltimore station, the original one, WBFF, to air community service reports about the danger of drugs. And in exchange for that, David's slate would be wiped clean. And at the time, it caused a lot of problems in that newsroom. The actual journalists who were employed by Sinclair Broadcasting are outraged. They were made to read scripts that they didn't have any approval on. It wasn't actual news. And as one of them said, how are you making employees do your community service for you? But it was a light bulb moment, a lightning bolt moment for the rest of us, because it was at that moment that David Smith allegedly realized, hey, wait a second, I can use these stations that I'm making all this money for to shape the conversation. I can literally erase a scandal and talk about an issue and make it the conversation point of the day anytime I want. And there's none of that pesky fairness doctrine standing in my way to prevent me from doing that. Right? So, okay. Since that time, they have made use of that ability to distort the truth and the media narrative. The Sinclair stations are credited, among other things, of in the 2000 and the early 2000s with Obamacare, alleging that Obamacare would kill people and starting that rumor. For those of you old enough to remember John Kerry running as the Democratic nominee for president, if you want to know the group that takes credit in 2004 for saying that the Purple Heart veteran lied about his military service, that would be Sinclair Broadcasting Group. But possibly one of the more recent examples of Sinclair Broadcasting impacting the conversation of the public and our elections was just this past year. In 2024, it was the Sinclair stations that got together and were told that they had to read from a script and air pre-packaged segments to say that President Biden's cognitive abilities were in serious decline. Okay? So, you want to know why so many very intelligent, very well read, even some, democratically leaning people believe that President Biden was in active decline and what could barely function? Forget any cognitive or dissident evidence that is in their face, like the State of the Union that he delivered at the first of that year, anything like that. Forget any of that, right? It's because their local news that they trusted was telling them this, and it was telling them this on repeat and on script. And so for years, Sinclair Broadcasting has had an agenda to promote a more conservative ideology and to make sure that they controlled enough politicians to keep it coming, right? So, right now, Sinclair Broadcasting is still pulling the strings because just last Monday, late night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel delivered a monologue about the killing of Charlie Kirk. And in that monologue, and I'm going to read it exactly, two excerpts of Jimmy Kimmel's monologue. His first excerpt. We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. That was it. That was the inflammatory remark number one, saying you guys are trying to score political points off of this guy's murder. That was it. He didn't celebrate it. He didn't say it should have happened. He didn't do a little dance and song number about someone passing away. He said, you guys should be ashamed because you're trying to score political points off this kid's murder. That was the first point. The second thing he did was he showed a clip of 47 responding to a reporter, something we covered on this very program that Tuesday night. And he said, he was asked by a reporter, 47 was asked how he was holding up after Charlie Kirk's death. And in that clip, 47 then begins to talk about the building of the beautiful ballroom. Did you see all those trucks? This is going to be great construction. To which, after that package was shown, Jimmy Kimmel said, this is not how an adult grieves the murder of someone he called a friend. This is how a 4-year-old mourns a goldfish. So he's actually criticizing them for not being somber enough. And I want to take a second here because, the media often has been failing us in their coverage. But did any of you know how tame and honestly how appropriate those comments were? Right? Didn't they make it seem like he said the most awful, heinous thing about this guy, about his widow, about the family? No, what they did do is two things. They insulted 47, which Jimmy Kimmel has done a number of times, most notably during an Oscar broadcast when he said, aren't you up past your jail time? Those types of things wounded 47's ego, and he never forgot it, and he was looking for an opportunity. So we had an opportunity that he was looking for on the 47 side, but we also had another ally in this awful fight against freedom of speech, which was Sinclair Broadcasting Group. And David A. Smith and others pushed back hard on this. Now, let me give you a quick timeline so you can see just how corrupt this entire thing was. The monologue happened on the night of the 15th. That was a Monday. So on Monday night, that monologue happens, including those two excerpts I said. That was the worst of it. That was it. And yet, radio silence on the 16th. Monologue happens on Monday night. Nothing happens on Tuesday. It's almost as if they were getting their story straight and what they were going to do. And then on Wednesday, bam, bam, bam. The FCC chair, Brendan Carr, went on a podcast and said that he condemned Kimmel's monologue. He called the remarks truly sick. He threatened regulatory consequences. He said that Disney could be held liable, that they would take action, and they could, quote, do this the easy way or do this the hard way. That is essentially the FCC chairman going on a live broadcast and saying, nice mouse you got there. Shame if something happened to it. Right? So, not so veiled threat. Then Sinclair announces that they don't care what happens federally. They're going to pull the Jimmy Kimmel Live show from their broadcasts, which again includes up to 40% of households across the country. And right after all of that, Disney says they are suspending Jimmy Kimmel's show indefinitely. All right. Now, we're going to get to the brighter side of this story. But before we do, I want to take some of your comments. You guys are doing so great. So we've got VC that's saying this has Heritage Foundation all over it. He wrote the chapter of Project 2025 for the FCC, so he was ready. Absolutely. VC, this was just like you say, this was a plan looking for an opportunity. This was not organic. This is something that they literally had in a playbook ready to hand over at the right time. They presumably had their meetings and like nods and secret messages and codes on the 16th. And then they said, let's go, let's do this thing. Right. So I agree with you that this was not organic. The Heritage Foundation, by the way, not just responsible. Sorry, I got to unplug this, guys, because it's getting hot. The Heritage Foundation, by the way, is not just known for now being involved in Project 2025. When I was researching this segment, I found out that the Heritage Foundation had its fingerprints all over that Reagan era deregulation of communications at that time as well. Okay. Now, Professor Liberty Esquire giving us the perfect segue as usual, saying that it is not airing here tonight, including in LA. That is correct. The fight is not over. So let's do a quick rundown of that, and then we're going to take more of your user comments. If you're just joining us on Political Fixer Live, we gave some context on just how deep and dark the Sinclair broadcasting status goes, but we're going to tell you something that you can do to fight back and the victories you've already had in fighting back. So you probably are familiar with some of the Disney ending of part of this story. America stepped up and was outraged about the Jimmy Kimmel show. Now, I think a whole conversation might be why. I've been in media strategy for years, probably too many more than I want to admit, and I am still consistently surprised as to what is the thing that grabs people's attention and puts them over the edge. That caterpillar is so cute. Okay. So the nation starts to step in and say, no, you're not coming after our free speech, our late night talk show host. You're not going to regulate what we get to hear and say, including from our comedians. The hashtag cancel Disney Plus started trending on nearly every social media platform. And many of you I know did posts on TikTok and other platforms showing and proving your cancellation of the platform. So many cancellations happened that their website crashed multiple times. And the reported figure, though we don't have firm confirmation of this, is over 50,000 people canceled their Disney Plus or related subscriptions. The Disney stock fell 3.5% in just that period of time of less than a week. Now, 3.5% might not sound like a lot, but because of the valuation, how much Disney is worth, 3.5 of a whole heck of a lot. The estimates of how much they lost in just 1 week range between 1.5 and $4 billion. So you all collectively cost them 1.5 to $4 billion. We had celebrities and political figures and rights groups all standing up and speaking out. There were protests that were held at the Disney corporate offices, and over 400 Hollywood personalities signed a letter drafted by the ACLU condemning the removal of Kimmel's show as censorship. And guess what, guys? It made a difference. Less than a week. I mean, less than a week. I have commended you all on your work with organizations like the Target stores, but this was really good work collectively, everyone. A pluses all around. Less than a week, Disney folded and they announced that Jimmy Kimmel will be back on again tonight. But don't worry, you can finish this broadcast with us. He doesn't air until later. But as some of you are pointing out, he won't be airing everywhere. The Jimmy Kimmel Live show, the Sinclair Broadcasting Group was like, I don't care what you say or what you do, we're not airing it. And even the chairman himself, even the FCC guy was like, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. And then he was like, no, just kidding, guys. I didn't mean anything by that. Like, that wasn't a threat. I wasn't, because Congress is like, hey, so you're not allowed to do that. And he's like, yeah, no, I do what? I was just saying stuff. I was just saying a line. I mean, the guy was just completely backpedaling, right? So you get this big guy to like backpedal and eat his words. Everything is riding with this effort that the American people are putting together. But Sinclair Broadcasting, who has all of this power and this consolidation of media outlets, for them, it's not enough. They are saying that they would like for Jimmy Kimmel to both give a contribution to Kirk's widow, to give a contribution to Turning Point USA, and to publicly apologize. They basically want to use him as someone to fall on the sword. And so because of that, because he will not to we haven't watched it yet. We don't know what he's going to say. We don't know any terms of him coming back that he's agreed to with Disney, but presumably we haven't heard of any consolidations he's had to make, any conciliatory gestures, any giving in. So right now Sinclair says we're not going to air it. Okay. So what can you do? First of all, I am not someone that normally watches late night television live. I barely watch a lot of television live unless it's football, as many of you know, go Knowles. But what I do watch are clips of these shows and I try to amplify them this way. Tonight, I'm going to try to stay up and watch it live. I want to support it. I want to, I want to be there on the pushback and say, hey, listen, I'm glad he's back. So I think us sharing and watching the program, if you can, record it and share it the next day if it's past your collective bedtime. I totally get that. That's one thing that's super easy that you can do. The second thing is to point out to people that the fight isn't over. The fact that Sinclair Broadcasting is not going to air this show and who they even are, who's even heard of Sinclair Broadcasting, not most normal people, right? And I love all of you guys, my political fixer family, but you all know we consume an awful lot of news. We are not exactly normal. I love you for it. But most typical people do not consume this much news and media. They don't know who Sinclair Broadcasting is. Start sharing that story. Start taking parts of it. Steal the clips of this show. It'll be on YouTube after it takes a few hours and then it gets posted there. Take what you want, right? The notes from it, clips from it, whatever you want to share the story of just how bad these people are and what they're controlling and the fact that they're driving this bus. But the other thing that you can do is you can actually affect someone as large as Sinclair Broadcasting. And this is our big wrap up of Seizing Your Power for tonight. And, this has been really a great show. I'm going to give you your homework assignment in just a second. Let me go ahead and say, first of all, wow, 120,000 likes. That's amazing. I hope that you really enjoy this program. We're going to talk more about your homework in a second and how you can actually impact a corporate giant like Sinclair. We're going to talk about that in just a second. I also want to thank JC Wisdom, Jolie, Kukui Cruz, Spider, Amy Cook, Sultry Nana. I love that handle. And Sheila Kuna. I want to thank you all so much for all of the gifts. And so many of you also are now fan club members. And I also particularly want to thank Ellie33, Karen Ann, Danette Dawn, Isaboy, and Amy Cook, as well as we already talked about Kathy, Carrie, and Leah, for sharing the program. Thank you so much for sharing Political Fixer Live. Now, if you thought that giving us praise and likes and love would make a difference to us, it does, but it's not getting you out of your homework assignment. Here is how you can actually impact Sinclair Broadcasting right now and keep this fight going. And don't worry, it doesn't involve canceling anything else that you may love. All right. When I was on the Obama campaign in 2007 and 2008, my positions changed as the campaign evolved, but where I landed that I loved was as one of the national coordinators for what we called rapid response. And what we used to do with the Obama campaign during rapid response is anyone that was on certain email lists or social groups or what have you, when there was a particular news story or a poll that someone would post, we would get information together and say, okay, go respond on this comment board, vote on the CNN watcher poll, call this person and thank them for the great interview they did of the senator, right? These were the types of things that we would do with rapid response. And in summer of 2008, prior to the election, during this time that people were starting to get to know who the potential first ladies might be, there was a story that I remember all too well that aired on Fox News, where they referred to future First Lady Michelle Obama as Obama's baby mama. Highly offensive, highly derogatory, with racial undertones to say the least. And I know it's such a simpler time, but still highly inappropriate. Now, keep in mind, this was Fox News. They did not care if we thought something was inappropriate. In fact, if we thought it was inappropriate, they were like, yay, go jump in a lake, right? But here's what we came up with to do. Many of our rapid response captains across the country would tape these segments. I know I'm dating myself, but we would VCR tape these segments or save them in some way. And we would see who the sponsors were of those segments. And I still remember this like it was yesterday. Two of those sponsors I can tell you were Tide, the detergent, and John Deere, the tractor company. One of them is a major corporation that you would think, why did they care what we think? And then there's John Deere. They're not exactly liberal, right? And yet, so many people were given their customer service numbers and their email addresses. We asked for them to call respectfully and politely, but to say that you are not going to support a product that is sponsoring such inappropriate comments like the Obama baby mama comment. And it worked. Within days, less than a week, Fox News formally apologized and said it was poor judgment. This stuff works. So, what can you do? First of all, there's a link that Sarah is going to share. I'm going to look and see what that link is specifically. It is politicalfix.click/Sinclair. Again, that's politicalfix.click/Sinclair, and she's going to be saving it in the comments. You can also just go directly to Sinclair Media, but what this link does is it takes you to a map that tells you, is your station owned by Sinclair? I didn't know. I had to look it up. A lot of people don't know. So this will take you to a map. It's on Sinclair's website. There's no tracking. You don't have to register, nothing like that. But you can see, is your station owned by them? If so, call the broadcast group and ask them, call the local station and say, I want you to air Jimmy Kimmel. That's one easy thing you can do. For the rest of us, we can look at the different sponsors that are shared. Any of you who watch whatever they put in late night instead of Kimmel on these Sinclair stations, whatever it is, make a list of the sponsors and share them. And then we can all call. We can call these corporations and say, why are you sponsoring censorship? Why are you against free speech? Why would I buy a product that is trying to reduce my constitutional rights? Whatever you think is appropriate and respectful. Here's the thing. Corporations pay money for advertising. They don't pay money to get yelled at. Very few corporations are like, here's a check. Please cause us to lose customers. It is a highly effective way to move forward. And yes, you guys did a great job of pressuring Disney. But we know what Sinclair Broadcasting values, specifically David Smith. It's one thing and one thing only, and that is money. So let's hit him where it hurts, in the pocketbook. Let's go after his sponsors. And this is an easy thing to do. You can do it from your home. You can do it from your phone. You can send an email. So we're going to be trying to follow this story and gather as many of these sponsors as we can. Feel free to send them to us. You can go to politicalfixer.com and send us an email. You can direct message us on any of our socials. That's politicalfixer.com. If you're someone who lives in a Sinclair broadcasting area and you can use that map to find out, do us a favor and make a list of who the sponsors were during late night. Any of those sponsors are fair game, because usually what happens is companies just buy a block of time. They just want to sponsor something generally. They don't know what's going to happen, but they can absolutely control the coverage in their own way if they get upset enough. All right. So I want to know your comments. What do you think about the Jimmy Kimmel situation? Are you going to be watching? What are your thoughts about the top story of the week? Gigi is pointing out, Gigi the reluctant diva, that it's also Nexstar. Yes, that is correct. Nexstar is also a corporation that is operating with this very conservative, to say the least, anti-constitutional belief of censorship. Now, what those stations are and how they're impacted with their ABC ownership, I do not know. But Nexstar is definitely of the same ilk. A lot of you are saying you'll definitely be watching. So Nexstar definitely, where will the link be? We're going to post that again. The link, you can either go directly to Sinclair Broadcasting, just Google it and then see their map of coverage. But I'm going to read it out loud again. And then I know Sarah's been saving it, but there's so many comments. Politicalfix.click/Sinclair. Politicalfix.click/Sinclair. We have our own short links. I try to make things as easy as possible. So when we find something useful for you guys, we squirrel it away with politicalfix.click links. So that's politicalfix.click/Sinclair. You can also look up, people are starting, hey, Rachel's starting to list out some of the different sponsors: Geico, YouTube TV, Progressive Insurance, Ozempic, Verizon. Noah bringing up a great point. No offense. Our power is based on how we spend our money. Absolutely. And we are finding out that more and more every single day. Guava Girl so kindly put out the direct link to Sinclair. Thank you so much. Kathy McGrath says, if I can stay up, I'll be watching. No worries, Kathy. I'm sure there are social clips and things tomorrow that you can share if you don't. Um, so Squarefoot Gardening is pointing out that Baltimore's ABC affiliate posted on Facebook that they were not happy with the decision. Highly unusual, but I love it. Power of the people indeed. All right, WTF, it's JoJo, ABC, Disney, Hulu, ESPN, National Geographic, listing a lot of the ABC and Disney properties. This is one question I have for some of you. Did any of you cancel Disney Plus or a similar subscription? That's my first part of the question. And then my second part of the question is, are you planning on going back? Is this enough to win back your love? Or are you like, wait a second. You guys still did the bad thing. I'd love to know that. And if you feel comfortable sharing, I would love to know if you have either children or grown children like me that love, are addicted to the sport, that maybe are factoring into that conversation, right? Lots of people saying, yes, you canceled and won't go back. Guava Girl, another good point that Disney. So you gotta love just the tone deafness of it all. So not only did Disney try to kind of bribe a lot of us by sending out a new Star Wars trailer for a movie that is not coming out until summer of 2026, and they're like, "Don't think about Kimmel. Look at the Grogu doll. Look at Baby Yoda." Right? Literally, like so sad, like a transparent attempt. And I mean, you guys know I love Star Wars, right? And even I was like, "Dude, come on," right? So then at first they tried like the carrot, like, look at this instead. And now they're trying the stick and they're like, oh yeah, well, because of you, we have to raise our prices. So they announced that the prices are going up. Not on Earth One, yes, and I'm not going back. VC is bringing up a great point that some local businesses advertise on these affiliates. And that is such a good point. And local businesses obviously are more easy, usually, they're easier to get to. And I just want to remind everybody a few ground rules here. Number one, be super nice when you talk to these people and express concern, but let's not go to rage. These are people that we want on our side, right? So you can say you're disappointed, you're upset that you won't do business with them. All of that is within bounds. Just kind of mind the p's and q's there, as we say. So that's the first ground rule. The second thing is, like, make sure that you can, if you feel comfortable, you share who your advertisers were with the rest of us as you can, because not all of us are going to have the same advertisers depending on which network and station we're walking. And Sultrina said, I tried to send you a suggestion and so yeah, TikTok is also going to be our new fun playground of what's going to happen next with the First Amendment. But if you're trying to reach me for whatever reason, and TikTok is sometimes not great at getting me you guys' message, though we love our TikTok family and we love you guys. But if you actually want to communicate with me, go to politicalfixer.com. That's politicalfixer.com. You'll get our real phone number, our real email address, and be connected with real humans, including myself. So if you're ever trying to reach me for whatever reason, you can use the contact form if you want, but you could just use our email address. We're crazy like that. All right, while you guys are continuing with the comments, I'm going to check on one important thing as we do our wrap up for tonight. I know we ran a little long, but we had a lot of stuff to cover. For those of you that joined us late in the hour, we covered what's happening with ICE, both good and bad, with the new unmasking rule that is the what we have going on with California, and how we can try to both share more stories of those who are victims of the inhumane and worse detention conditions. We can try to keep that story alive by sharing it. And also we can ask our state legislators, and particularly, to pass unmasking laws. That was the first segment of Power. Our second segment of Power, we were talking about 47's awful, terrible, no good, horrible life, and how everything is going wrong for this dude, including poll numbers and so much more, including his border czar getting caught in a fraud sting. All of these things happening, but the thing that he is most concerned about has to do with the potential release of the Epstein files due to what's called a discharge petition. Just like, think of a regular petition that needs one more signature. And we're keeping an eye on the Arizona special election for Congress in District 7 tonight that's happening. Just so you all know, I did look at it. The polls are closed, but we have no results yet. if this race is successfully won by a Democrat, she, Adelita, has already said that she will happily sign the discharge petition, putting that number over the top of a majority of 218 signatures, which means it moves forward in the process. So we're going to keep a careful eye on that story. And then we ended our coverage for tonight covering not just the Jimmy Kimmel story from a what the heck just happened this week perspective, but going into a little bit of a deep dive on unmasking one of our hidden media monster figures, someone that hasn't gotten enough attention, like a Rupert Murdoch or an Elon Musk, and that is David Smith of Sinclair Broadcasting. So, Mr. Smith, you have our attention now, and we're definitely going to be continuing to watch you and your actions in the future. All right. I see so many mixed comments here. I love the people that are like, this is stupid. And then I see Kiki saying that you love this show and me. Thank you so much for both the love and honestly the hate. We get the numbers either way. Just be kind to each other. I really don't care what you say about me or the stories. It's really okay. You guys have been amazing tonight. We are at nearly 145,000 likes on this episode of Political Fixer Live. This is only our second weekend to the season, guys. That's pretty awesome. I hope that you'll do your homework as much as you feel comfortable doing so, and that you will continue to cause some good trouble and exercise those powerful voices of yours in whatever way, again, that you feel is appropriate for you and yours. I hope that you will join us next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, same bat channel, same bat time, YouTube, Substack, and TikTok if they don't kick us off. If you ever need me for whatever reason, politicalfixer.com is the way for you to go. We are going to be on the air next Tuesday, and we'll be talking about so much more other stuff, including not just the news, but some of the stuff we've been cooking in the lab for all of you. And I hope you'll keep an eye, not just on Kimmel, but on the Arizona special election that is happening tonight. And I want to thank Bolts Magazine for their tireless local coverage of all of these races and always keeping us informed about every impactful election that's going on around the country. It is a localized independent media group. If you ever, again, we talked about the amazing coverage of Miami Herald. Shout out to local journalism, but also let's credit specialized journalism like Bolts Magazine as well. Thank you all so much for a great night. I hope that you had a good one. I hope that you feel a little bit more uplifted. I was hoping to bring some positivity to all of the news coverage tonight. May your weeks be positive. I hope you take care of yourselves and each other, and may your escalators not get stuck on the way up to your destination. That's an inside baseball story. Google it. Oh my Lord, people, the stuff that happened at the United Nations. Great show to all of you. 150,000 likes. That's amazing. Good night. I will see you all soon. Thanks to our political fixer team, Sarah and Jay Robot, and to all of you for joining us. I'm Shauna Presley Vircher. I'll see you all soon. Good night.